Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton joins me now. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon, Minister. Let's just start with this tender document that Christina Keneally is referring to on the Home Affairs Department website, calling for doctors to conduct desktop reviews of individuals in regional processing countries. What's that tender document about?
Well, David, look, I've got to say that all these red herrings are thrown out by the Labor spokeswoman, but let's get back to the facts. I just listened to some of that contribution. Probably the most ill-informed and dangerous view that I've heard from a Labor spokesperson in many years. I think if Ms Keneally had been the Immigration Minister in the Rudd-Gillard years, it would have been 100,000 people on 1,600 boats instead of only 50,000 on 800 boats. So I want, there are all sorts of distractions here, but dealing with the medevac bill, what has been provided for now is for doctors to be in a position where they have the capacity to, on the papers, as it were, without any interaction with the patient at all, and I'm advised today potentially without even the consent of the patient, make application and come to our country. They can be people of poor character. They can be people that have been either charged or pending conviction for a very serious offence, including sexual offences against women. They all come under Labor's model. And the debate today is about whether or not the Labor Party is going to support our repealing of this dangerous law, which is a law of Labor's making, in the Senate when Parliament returns in the first week of July. I've heard a bet each way from Labor today. Mr Albanese needs to take control of what is an unravelling situation for the Labor Party at the moment, and he needs to come out and say whether or not they will support the government to repeal this bad law in the Parliament.
All right, I want to come back to some of what you've said there, but just to clear this point up, have any transfers taken place under the old system, or the current medevac system, where doctors are just looking at the files rather than consulting the patient?
David, we have people on island, including our own staff, including medical staff, people who are providing services through NGOs, etc., at different points, if you look at the journey for the time that people have been on Manus or Nauru, that look at their individual cases. There are staff members, contractors on island who are trained to look for warning signs, that are trained to engage with people, have conversations with people about their individual circumstances, encouraging them to go back home, particularly if they've been found not to be refugees. So there's a lot of information that would inform decisions. But again, Labor is running off with all of this ill-informed judgment.
I just want to clear up
I actually
what's
think,
happening
David,
now. Sorry. I just want to clear up this point, though. Yes, I appreciate there's a lot of consultation goes on the ground, but has anyone been brought here without a consultation by just looking at the files?
People will come here once they've had a proper assessment of their circumstances, and that's why we pay...
Including a consultation?
We have paid, and it will be a consultation, as we've seen on Nauru, as we've seen at the Port Moresby International Hospital. We look at individual cases.
So no one's come without a consultation?
Well, people are consulted because, again, it shows a complete either naivety or complete ignorance in terms of what the current process is, where 1,000 people have come to Australia already. And what we do is have an elevated system. So people might be able to get the medical attention that they require on island, either on Nauru or on Manus, because we've paid many tens of millions of dollars for medical services to be provided in both locations. If the acuity is at such a level it can't be provided for on island, then they can go to either a facility where Taiwan, for example, where some cases have gone, where there's an arrangement there, the Port Moresby Hospital, and if the services can't be provided in one of those locations, then people can come to Australia. And as I say, they have come to our country. But a lot of what is being said by the Labor Party at the moment, I think could be cleared up if the Labor Party just took the time to have a proper briefing and listen to the expert advice, the experts in my department, the Secretary of the department, so that they're actually informed when they come and talk about these matters.
One of the confusing things, I think, for a lot of people in this, I mean, you point out 1,000 people have now been brought to Australia under, on medical grounds, largely under the old existing departmental system. 30 have been brought over the last few months under the medevac arrangements. And during that 3 months, you know, people, even more people than 30 have come under the old existing departmental arrangement. Is that right? And why then are there these 30 that were knocked back that have had to come on the medevac rules?
Because, David, some people are trying it on. Let's be serious about this. There are people that claimed that they'd been raped and came to Australia to seek an abortion because they couldn't get an abortion on Nauru. They arrived in Australia and then decided that they were not going to have an abortion. They have the baby here. The moment they step off the plane, their lawyers lodge papers in the federal court which injuncts us from sending them back. There have been many ways in which people have worked within the rules and around the rules, and there are many cases where people legitimately need medical attention. Under the old arrangements...
But on these 30 who've come under the medevac rules, are you saying under those 30 who've come on the medevac rules, who are presumably knocked back on the old existing rules, they include women who allege to have been raped?
No, I'm saying in terms of those people that have come over a period of time, I can't answer that question, to be honest, because I don't know the individual cases in the detail that I did. Mr Coleman's obviously had this area of responsibility for a period of time, and I've taken it back since the machinery of government changes since the election. So in some of those cases, I think you could question whether or not people needed medical attention. That's the reality. And there historically, from my first-hand knowledge of looking at some of these cases, that has been the case where people have come seeking medical attention. When they've arrived, it's not been sought, or they've dispensed with the with the niceties pretty quickly, and now that they're here in Australia know that they can't be sent back. So of the 1,000, there are many people who would be part of it. Well, let me finish this point. Let me finish this point. So of the 1,000, there are many people who have come to support a family member. So there's not 1,000 people who have come seeking medical attention or that were in need of medical attention. There are some people who are suffering psychological issues where it's advised that there should be loved ones or support friends or family that come with them. Now, that has reduced dramatically, but that's as it was over the last couple of years at different points in time.
And they're all now living in the community, right?
For many of them they are, unless they've committed an offence since they've been here, in which case they would have gone back into detention. But it's part of the way in which we've been able to get all of the children out of detention and off Nauru. That's been very important.
Through medical transfers.
Yeah, that's been part of it. And they've come where mum or dad has suffered a medical condition, and the children, as you would expect, have come with their parents. So the talk from Labor
that somehow the 30 that have come under
is a nonsense.
Sorry, the 30 who've come under medevac, then, are you saying they're not really sick, they don't really deserve the transfer?
I think you'd want to have a look at each of the cases, and in some of those cases there has been a rejection by Minister Coleman. That's been overturned by the panel, and we've seen the current court case where the Secretary was taken to court and lost that case, and that case decided that under Labor's law, people could come here without even being consulted by a doctor. And when you look at the advocacy background of some of the doctors that are involved, then I do think you need to start asking questions. These aren't two government doctors. They aren't panel-appointed doctors. They are any two GPs. And as we know, as you know, there are many activists working for refugee groups right across the country that don't believe in offshore processing, don't believe in any aspect of
But you've still got the panel of doctors
borders.
sitting in judgment on that. You've still got the panel of doctors, including the chief medical officer and so on.
Well, but the way in which Labor's law was constructed, the numbers are not with the government, not with the chief medical officer, but with those people that have been appointed, and they've been appointed by the colleges and otherwise. And you can look at those individual cases. We were fiercely against this bill. We warned Labor about it at the time. It was nothing more than an opportunity for Bill Shorten to try and keep the left of his party under control in the run-up to the election. It's a bad law. It should be revoked, and Labor should support its repeal in the parliament.
You did warn, of course, at the time, rapists, pedophiles, murderers might come in. I know you were asked about this on Sunday. Have you yet established whether any have?
I think there are some people that have come of bad character, David. I don't think there's any question about that. And under Labor's law...
Amongst these 30, are there any rapists, murderers, pedophiles?
Well, we'll have a look at the details in due course. And I'd make this point, though. The point made by the Labor Party, and you heard a bit of the rhetoric in the previous interview, people of bad character can come, are able to come, and in fact are required to come under Labor's laws that they passed. That's the reality. So if you've got a national security check...
And you're saying there are people of bad character who have come?
I'm saying there are some people of bad character who have come to our country.
What sort of bad character?
Well, I'll go into those details at the appropriate time, David, but what I'm worried about now, particularly out of this court decision and particularly out of Labor saying that they won't support us in the parliament to repeal this bad law, I am worried about many more cases coming through. And I think many of those people were believing, as the refugee advocates told them, that Labor would win the election and that they would be here in significant numbers in big uplifts overnight and that they'd be living in Australia. I think that's why, frankly, many of them decided not to apply through the medevac provisions. And for us, if we can bring people outside of those provisions, it gives us a greater capacity to return them when they have received their medical attention, which of course is not the case under Labor's bill.
But have any of the 1,000 brought here under the existing arrangements been returned?
Well, where we've been injuncted, we can't return those people, David. That's the way in which the courts operate here.
So whichever way they come,
they stay. Well, potentially, but under Labor's bill, it's not about coming for medical attention. Let's be clear. I mean, call it out for what it is. It was always about keeping the left of the Labor Party under control. Mr Shorten never proposed this bill in the whole period of opposition until Kerryn Phelps introduced a bill. And then he couldn't contain the left of his party. That's what happened here. People were already coming for medical attention, and now the Labor Party thought they were going to win the election and that they'd mop it up afterwards. Well, they haven't won the election, and they are dealing, as we are, with the aftermath of a very bad decision. And under Labor's law, once people have received the medical attention that they've sought and that they've arrived here to receive, they then can't go back under any circumstance. And that is not in our country's best interest. You can't have other people, including advocates in the community, whether they're a doctor or not, essentially telling a government of the day who can come to the country and the fact that they can't leave when they've received the medical attention. These people are therefore on a pathway to permanent settlement and to become Australian citizens. And in some cases, I don't believe that's what the Australian people would want.
Just a final one before I let you go, Minister, on the Paladin contract. We know PNG this week have said they don't want that to be extended, the contract with Paladin at Manus Island. Is it going to be put to an open tender, and why not? Well,
David, as you know, ministers of the Crown don't have day-to-day involvement for good reason in who gets contracts and what contract values will be attached to different contracts, etc. That's all a matter for the department, as it is for any department in the Commonwealth, and frankly at a state level as well, where there are proper procurement rules put in place. There are well-known controls around the way in which those contracts are let, either to people on panels or to an open contract. That'll be an issue for the government, but I'll make this point. We work very closely with PNG. I never put a person onto Manus nor onto Nauru. I've halved the numbers effectively that are up there at the moment, and I'm going to continue to do that until we get it down to zero. So we'll continue to work very closely with our Papua New Guinean colleagues, and in the end I want good value for Australian taxpayer money. I don't want to be spending any money, frankly, on Manus or Nauru, but Labor put people there without any plan at all to get people off, so we need to deal with and clean up that mess. And I just wish Mr Albanese would come out of hiding and tell us whether or not he'll ultimately support the government to repeal Labor's law, which is a bad law, and it undermines border security in this country.
Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, we have to leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, David. Thank you.